So at this point, we're going to shift gears and talk about the next ontology, and that's the differentiated individual ontology. Now, in this ontology, in this ontology, in contrast to the undifferentiated individual ontology, in lieu of having a certain individual or a metaphysical source speak for us, instead of looking to a particular metaphysical source, this ontology, the differentiated individual ontology, assumes that the metaphysical source is everywhere and it is in everyone and everything. So, to draw, it would look something like this. Where you've got your entity here, and you've got a big one inside every entity. And there doesn't seem to really be any sort of relationship between these entities. So every single person is a universe of one. So if I were to use a hokey 80s reference, looking at He-Man, He-Man has the power. He takes out that sword. I have the power. He is his own metaphysical source when he draws that sword. And he's able to make kind of his own rules within Eternity or Grayskull, right? But let's maybe take something that might be a little bit more relevant to management. Think of entrepreneurs, and in fact this applies to the theory of effectuation. Just as a reminder, because I discussed effectuation in the market capitalism model. In effectuation, that's basically when an entrepreneur can kind of create something almost out of nothing. They have kind of things around them and they reconstruct materials, ideas, and their identity in some sort of a way to make a profit. Okay. Now, we talked about effectuation in the market capitalism model in that the entrepreneur creates new supply and demand curves. They create new markets. Okay. In this case, effectuation means that the entrepreneur perceives some sort of unmet moral need, and through recombining elements of their environment, they can kind of create their own new morality that hopefully grows big enough that it kind of consumes the other forms of morality. So the entrepreneur here, okay, has their own ideas of what's right and wrong and what people actually need. They take whatever money, whatever tools, and whatever connections they have, create their own little universe here, and hopefully that universe becomes kind of powerful enough that it can kind of grow and consume these other entities within their immediate sphere. And you think, well, really, what does that have to do with entrepreneurship? I don't think really entrepreneurs think that way. Well, both wildly successful and wildly unsuccessful entrepreneurs would use a differentiated individual ontology and effectuation simultaneously. Think of all those Silicon Valley entrepreneurs operating in their garage. They probably didn't do a lot of market analysis, again, because if you are creating a new market, there's no point really doing a market analysis because the market doesn't exist yet. So these are people that, in their garage, they create something what we call ex nihilo, out of nothing. Okay? And they create their own firm, which has redefined markets. Think of Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. There really wasn't much precedent for Facebook. Okay? So he had his own idea. He knew about tech, he had people that he could work with, and he had an idea, and he recreated, and that has redefined the morality of how people actually communicate. That's a great example of effectuation when it's created from nothing. But wildly unsuccessful entrepreneurs operate this way too. I have an in-law who is an entrepreneur. He knows everything. He has all sorts of wonderful ideas, but he's not going to interview customers, he's not going to talk to anybody, and time again, he starts a business and it fails usually within 2 or 3 months. And it's a miracle that it doesn't bankrupt him. Using the materials that he has on hand, he creates a universe of his own, but unfortunately that universe isn't powerful, interesting, or lucrative, and it falls apart. But maybe let's step out a little bit from the entrepreneurship perspective and look at maybe something from political science. Okay? We have modern liberalism. So under modern liberalism, and by the way, the term liberal has many kind of definitions to it. And what we're talking about here is economic liberalism. Okay? So, not political liberalism, so not left-leaning. In modern economic liberalism, this would apply to the differentiated individual ontology, because what we're saying is to the government, you know what? I'm a big boy and I can manage my affairs all by myself. I'm the one who makes my own rules and I can do it all by myself. In fact, that sounds a lot like laissez-faire, doesn't it? Which we discussed in our market capitalism model. So what we're looking at here is not that the government should stay out of my affairs because it's more efficient, but the government should stay out of my affairs and let me manage myself because it has no right to manage things for me. And then another offshoot tied to that, of course, would be people like John Locke during the period of Enlightenment, okay, which is also a form of liberalism, where all individuals have certain inalienable rights that cannot be taken away from them. Within our own little sphere, we all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There are certain things that cannot be taken away from us. We are born with these divine qualities. We are our own metaphysical source, our own big O. Now, another political theory that goes with this is individual anarchism. Individual anarchism basically says, I reject all forms of authority. I reject governments, I reject societal authority, I reject business authority. I am my own universe and I am unto myself, and I reject the authority of everyone else and everything else. Okay. We have atheism. And that is basically saying that there is no God. We are all natural beings, and so in some ways we are all kind of divine, but there's no higher divine presence. And then lastly, we have polytheism. Which, in this example, polytheism is saying that God is everywhere and we are all our own gods. So some of these theories are a little bit more on the philosophical and political side, but again, they do have certain business applications, as I mentioned during effectuation. But if you look at it more of in a corporate context, there are certainly cases where you might have strategic business units that are isolated from the overall company strategy, kind of operate in their own bubble. You hear about the siloing effect that happens in corporations. This is a great application of the siloing effect. A certain strategic business unit operates in their own bubble. They are not particularly aware of what's going on in the rest of the company or the overall company strategy. They just kind of operate and do their own thing. So this has been the differentiated individual ontology. In our next video, we will talk about the undifferentiated relational ontology, which I've had trouble applying in too many instances, but I certainly find it one of the more interesting ontologies. So we will see you then.